There's sort of two sides to this. There's the underlying model, and then there's the company itself and everything that it's gone through with its governance issues. I think the underlying model has really benefited a lot of companies from disrupting real estate, separating the need for signing a lease, getting stuck into something long-term from the day-to-day of running a company. I think that's positive. I think that model generally works. This company specifically, though, has a lot of issues to it. I mean, how much money the founder has taken out of it. There's questions about sort of where the board was along this whole time, being overvalued to the point where it can't go public. I mean, these are real issues specific to this company.
Sandy, I know you're optimistic on WeWork's financial model, but are you worried about its financial position? Because it's only sitting at around $2.5 billion of cash, and it was expected to raise about $4 billion in its IPO.
Well, I think that, given the high burn and pulling the IPO, you have to be somewhat worried. But that said, I think that SoftBank and the Vision Fund do have ample capital. So I expect, they really will control the purse strings. And I think that's kind of the explanation for why there was just a change with the CEO. And so I think they're going to continue to fund the business for the foreseeable future. But certainly, I think they're worried, and we're seeing that now, given all the changes that they're making at the top.
Charlie, are there reasons to be fearful of the broad commercial property market if WeWork starts to have a few troubles?
I think a lot of the issues are specific to this company, but the fact remains, WeWork is the largest real estate holder in New York City at the moment. And so, yeah, there are going to be probably some renegotiations or attempts of leases. There could be some empty spaces that frankly don't get filled that they might need to get out of. And so I do think there are some issues, but New York City is a real growing and thriving startup community. I think there are companies to fill them. I don't know though if they will be able to entangle themselves from the financial and economics of those leases.
Sandy, you mentioned that there's deep enough pockets for the backers to keep funding the business. But I mean, it seems here that public investors might have been able to look through even some of the governance things if they did have confidence that underlying it all was a business that scales. I mean, subleasing space to startups or to businesses on a shorter term than your own leases on its own isn't necessarily a revolutionary business. It doesn't seem like it has necessarily a defensible business position. So how would you make the other side of that argument?
Yeah, well, those are good questions. And I would say that WeWork does deserve a lot of credit for innovating, with the co-working model. And I think that even if you're bearish on WeWork, you're going to admit that in 5 years, there's going to be a lot more co-working space out there. And WeWork has a very strong market position. That said, I think where they really missed strategically is focusing on unit economics and really using technology and scale to prove that, as well as innovating on user experience with technology. And so if you look at other players who have taken a fixed cost and made it variable and then used the internet and technology to innovate, companies like Netflix and Amazon with AWS, and they've made spectacular businesses with that model, but they've also focused on unit economics and technology. And I think WeWork leadership has really been focused on other things, at least in the past few years, judging by a lot of the headlines now coming out.
How much of the blame, Sandy, falls at SoftBank's feet?
Well, I think there's a lot of blame to go around, but I do think a lot of it does. I think if you went back in time to great growth companies like take Starbucks, early on when they had 100 locations and you went to the CEO and you said, hey, take your growth plan, triple it, don't worry about unit economics, I think it would have been pretty bad for Starbucks. And I think that's kind of what happened here with WeWork. And I think that if the board and the investors had pushed harder on unit economics and really using technology, and not as a show pony, but really using it to improve user experience, I think the company would be in a much better position now. They wouldn't have probably raised at a $47 billion valuation a few months ago, but I think they might look more like Peloton, let's just say, which has also that model of taking a fixed cost, making it variable, using technology, using internet to make the experience better. I think it's a model that can work, but it's easier said than done.
Charlie, you think the trouble that a lot of these tech unicorns have been facing is not only a wake-up call for the leaders of these companies, but also on investors like yourself that invest in early-stage companies to push these founders to think about profits earlier on versus right before they're about to go public?
Oh, absolutely. I think there are a lot of governance issues here. And I think one problem is having a board that's entirely composed of investors who benefit in the short term from the markups of another round of, from SoftBank or from some larger player. It makes it easier for them to raise their funds. Looks like the company is performing well. And I think this is a really bad situation for investors in the longer term. I mean, it's interesting to me that, Wall Street execs are worried about the governance that might come from sort of an Elizabeth Warren or somebody like that. But from my perspective, I think good governance is good for capitalism. I think it's really important to make sure that these valuations don't run away with themselves, that founders don't take $700 million out of a business before employees get paid out. That's the environment that I want to be an investor in, where we can sort of work within a set of guardrails so we don't get into situations like this.